Welcome back to New Bubbington. In our last episode, we created a multi-tiered college campus, and this covered some of our essential college needs as well as our high school and elementary school needs. But in today's episode, I want to bring our attention a little bit more to the residential expansion of New Bubbington. We're beginning to get a few pop-ups of not enough customers. And one of the complaints that our city has, aside from high rents, is also small homes. So I want to focus a little bit more on the lower density housing of our community. So far, the only low density residential that we have is up by the initial starting tile of New Bubbington. And not only does this need a little bit of work, but it's relatively disconnected from the rest of the city as far as transportation links go. So in today's episode, I want to focus our attention a little bit more to this part of the map. I'm picturing Little Venice in California, where you have a few canals running through and a lot of really beautiful low density houses. So with that in mind, I'm going to start to draw out our arterial framework as well as some canals through the region in order to make this area a little bit more interesting. We're going to start by buying the tiles that we need for this part of the map. And at the moment our budget's relatively healthy, so I'm not too concerned with buying too many tiles. And the next thing that I want to do is expand our arterial roads. So we have this one coming from our marina side, and I'm envisioning that this is going to eventually carry on flowing down the marina as this expands with density. So we're just going to get our continuous road. Snapping is on, and we're going to make sure that it is a constant slope in order to get to the ground. I also think we're going to do ground mode to force the ground up, and then we can always put a key wall later on if we need. And I think roughly a 5% gradient is fine for this. And then we're going to continue this along the coastline, bring a little bit of a curve, and carry on going down. And that will do for the time being. As far as this second arterial goes, which comes down from Upper Bubbsville, and also please give me suggestions for names in the comments. I am clearly running out of ideas and still need to name the whole Marina district. But I feel like this arterial doesn't make a lot of sense here, as it reaches a dead end towards not a lot of density. And I actually think that bringing this one road down to where our highway connection is going to make a lot more sense in order of moving people around. So we're going to delete this little stub here, and for the time being we might just upgrade this road here to one of our parking roads, as it will have the same footprint, and that way it won't cause any issues with our zoning. And I'm pretty sure that this would be a welcome addition to the area. We are going to do the same with this road here. And what we're going to do instead is upgrade this road down here. And we want to extend this now down to cross our river, and in order to do that, we are going to raise up by just a small amount. So I'm going to bring the elevation step down, raise it up to about 2.5 meters would be more than enough to get past this area. And then I want to remove ground, and it's already given us an elevated section. And for such a small stretch of canal, I feel like this is enough elevation for what we want. We're going to force ground and bring it back to 0. And that is great. In terms of where I want this arterial to go, I think it's important that it would eventually connect up to the marina, but I want to allow a little bit more room for our residential expansion, which is going to be in this part of the block. So with that in mind, I want to bring up a little bit of the framework here without a particular destination, and then I want to bring this arterial down here. And we're going to put our curved road on, and I did that wrong. So we will put our curved road on and connect that up. And I am happy with the amount of room that this gives us, as well as the amount of connection. And the way that we're going to create the canals is by doing it the same way that we create our quays, in terms of drawing out the roads first and then adding the water and removing the soil afterwards, as I think it's going to give us a much more consistent result and something that overall I'm going to be happier with. So to make that happen, I first want to create our main frame along the top, and I'm going to keep it as ground for now and also constant slope, and we're going to remove guidelines except for these three. And I want to make sure that we have enough depth for our houses to be of a substantial size. So I'm going to go for, I believe this is 8 squares deep, so that we can have slightly larger assets on some of the sides. This would be one of our first peninsulas per se, and we can carry on drawing some of the rest in now too. Now that we have our main road layout in place, we just need to carve out the terrain. So we're going to go into our extended road services, and we're going to pick, well, extended road services. I think it's actually part of Anarchy now, right? So we're going to start from about here and just create a key wall along the whole interior part of the canal, which is very easy because we can just drag along the edge, as long as it's not creating key walls where we don't want them. And then we'll come through and create our bridges in a moment. So let's just get these all in. So now these need to be turned into elevated sections, as they are going to be our road bridges over the terrain. And then as for the rest, we can now carve out the terrain. So we're going to go with the same depth as the canal that we currently have. And we'll just come through and carve out this terrain. And I think there's just one last canal bit that I'd like to build, and that is in fact just here, as I want some of the water to make sure that it's coming downstream, so that technically there'd always be enough water, at least in certain parts of the canal. So let's just get one more road connection in here, and it can be a one-way. Now, while that fills up with the water from the little canal, I'm going to go ahead and remove some of our trees and foliage that is in the area, just so that we can clear the space. And then we're just going to fix some of our wonky bits with Move It, as there's a couple of different terrain heights happening at the moment. So by clicking our nodes, holding shift and clicking all of our nodes along the edge of the road, we can then press Ctrl-H and choose which node we want to elevate these to. And I wonder if that's a little bit too high for the area, so maybe we'll try this node. Is that too low? Let's compare. I think that may be a little bit low. So I think this height is a good height to aim for. We'll just make sure that all of the nodes are to that same height. Great, so now that we have our main canal region separated, I've gone through and already selected some of the assets that I want to see in this area, and it's mostly a mix of some of our EU low density residential, some of our North American assets, and a couple of the Southwest. But in particular, we are looking at, that one slipped through. In particular, we're looking at pretty modern houses, as they're all relatively blocky, they're quite square in nature, and they seem and feel very modern in general. And I feel like that would be really fitting for this kind of part of town. But before we get into placing the houses, we are going to have a look at putting in some of our parks, a little bit of commercial, and then some of our more signature assets. So I'm going to start with the signature assets, and the three that I'm looking at are the Painter's Mansion, which is beautiful and it's super modern. The Theatre Actor Mansion, again, same sort of thing. It is a really modern building, but it's really beautiful. I think it's part of the European part. And then the Sculptor's Mansion. Again, a lot of detail, a really beautiful building. So we just need to think about where these could be placed and what part of town would be the nicest. And as much as this is surrounded by water, I think maybe they'd be annoyed by the noise pollution from the highway. So I actually feel that these little tips here would be some of the most amazing parts of town to be in, particularly these two here. So we're going to start by having a look at the Theatre Actors Mansion, and I'm going to place this one just here. Yeah, this is such a beautiful asset. The next one that I want to place is gonna be the painter's mansion. And I think this one could be facing out to the road. And let's just Ctrl H him to the height of our road. That is better. Yeah, this is a beautiful asset to be here on the corner. And then lastly here, we are going to place the sculptor's mansion. Is it the sculptor's one? Yeah, we haven't placed this one. I feel this could be placed towards this side of the road. Yeah. I mean, that would be such an insane location for these mansions, as you're in the heart of the city and you're very easily accessible to the rest of town, but you're also still secluded into your own little neighborhood. And we're going to make sure afterwards with some of our policies that only people that live or work here can enter this part of town in terms of driving. So the next thing that I want to have a look at is some of our parks. I want to avoid them being too big, as I would imagine that this part of town, the land value would be very expensive. So I want them to feel pretty deliberate in terms of the intention. So we're going to place the Dockyard Lounge Park, which we already have in another part of the marina, but I'm quite happy to repeat the asset as it's one of my favorites. And I feel like it would provide just enough entertainment without us sprawling into commercial uses. But this could be your sort of local bar cafe that would really be quite popular amongst the area. Let's have a look at what other leisure venues assets we have that on the smaller end might fit in this part of town. Oh, the Riverside Grill, actually we removed from another part, could fit in perfectly here. And I think that is the perfect location for it. Let's just make sure that this side is also leveled. And then we're just going to place a couple of our standard parks in before we get to choosing which houses we want in place. So let's get a dog park, as everybody loves a dog park. And we could place this closer to the main road. We're also going to place one of the new assets we received in the update, so the hilly playground, and I wonder if we can remove, no, not that, can we remove, yes, perfect. That makes it a lot easier on the eyes while still being somewhat different to our usual park assets. I really like that there. What else could we put in this area? The next asset I want to have a look at is the Color Plaza, and we're just going to place it down to see what we'd be working with. And I feel like this would be a really great addition to the area, so we're going to leave that right there actually. What else could we be adding here? Another asset that we could place is the Sports Hub Pavilion. It is a rather large asset and it has a lot of parking, which I think we'd want to aim the other side. However, this side has a lot of outdoor seating, and I imagine it would be really, really popular amongst the people here. I don't know if we actually fit, which is a little bit annoying, but we may be able to move this road down a little bit, or potentially move this one up. think we're going to opt to move this one up, and let's see if we can do that by upgrading without the snapping on, without the key wall on. Let's just see. Yeah, that should give it enough room. We'll just get this one lined up too. And that does my head in, but we are going to live with it because I feel like it's going to be a better result. Let's move that, and then this one without the elevated on. The reality is, when you look at cities, none of the roads really line up. I mean, unless you're looking at like New York or more of your United States locations where everything's been planned in a grid, but the reality is most towns will have wonky roads. So I'm going to face it on the main road, even though I'm hoping that it might have some connections on the back sides, which I don't think it's the case. It might have a connection here, but I think that this would be the perfect asset around here. And once we create our pedestrian connections between our canals, I think that this would be a really popular location. So in terms of parks, I think we have enough. Now I want to focus on getting our houses in. So let's have a look at some of the houses that I've separated in my favorites. And I want to make sure that the lots are used fully. So for here we're going to need a depth of 4. And annoyingly you can't and we're going to make sure that we try and face these onto the canals where we can. So I don't mind if a lot of them look quite similar, as I feel like an individual developer might have come through to do this. So we'll just place a variation of the same assets in. Now that we have the majority of our residential assets in place, which you can see are a real mix of sort of modern houses in a few different styles, I think maybe an area like this would have a strict code on what you're allowed to build, and that's, in my head, probably why most of these assets look relatively similar or would have used the same kind of developers, just so that the whole area is protected in terms of the aesthetic. And the only house that stands out really is the architect's mansion, which it fit perfectly in the block, and I kind of felt like it had to go there because of that. I was hoping the roof would be able to be recolored, but it can't. But maybe later on we'll be able to find a decal that can maybe tone down the color a little bit. But I think potentially the person that lives here could have been the person that ideated the canals and the structure for this, and therefore their house is the one that maybe is a little bit more grand than all of the others. And I also love how our initial mansions sort of blend in seamlessly with all of the other houses. This one with the tennis court too. But anyway, now that we have those in place, we're just going to look for a few commercial assets just to plop into our little open spaces along this main little boulevard that comes down, just as a point of commercial activity for the area. I feel like something simple like this would be a perfect fit. I'm not entirely sure why the poster is way up there, but we'll sort that out later. I also feel like that could work well. Maybe if they are tucked together, it could sort of look as if the assets are meant to, as if you're meant to drive through both of them, which I quite like. Let's have a look at what we can place over here. Yeah, that is a perfect asset for this little park, little cafe in the middle, or sort of restaurant. Let's see what's occupied it. Furniture. Okay, a bit random, but I'm picturing in my head that this is some sort of cafe. And we have a really beautiful part of town developing here. You can imagine that this would be some of the wealthiest part of New Bubbington at the moment. Another thing that I noticed is that the water doesn't make it all the way down, so I'm potentially thinking that we expand our canal either downwards towards the sea here as well and create a bridge, or we come further down and cross this sort of main arterial, two arterials I guess, and create a little bit more of a feature, but that goes more towards the city side of things as opposed to it being residential still. And I think I'm inclined more to do that so that it again creates a little bit more of a feature and a little bit more of a fun element through the city. So we're going to get that in place. So now that we've got that in, I want to fill in the rest of these blocks, and for me this needs to be a little bit of a transition between the beautiful low density modern housing, which, you know, would have a huge value to noise and to pollution and things not being too busy, as I would imagine they would prefer this to be more of a gated community. So I want to be pretty select with what we have to help transition that zone. And maybe it's a mix of parks and pathways and a couple modern apartments, as opposed to just zoning in commercial or other sort of uses in here. I'm also going to fix a couple of these horrific roads, as that is not good. So now that we have our main detailing done, there's a couple last few bits that I want to place down, and the first one being the crematorium. I don't know if you've noticed throughout, but we're having a bit of an issue with hearses and people getting collected. It seems to be alright right now with all 15 not being used, which is a relief, but there's certain moments where the city struggles. So I want to place the crematorium just here, and it's not my favorite in terms of style and it fitting in, but I could imagine possibly how some of these older buildings have been here for a while and been more established, and then things have built up around them, or that's kind of what I'm going for in my head. But feel free to let me know if you think it fits in or if I should move it somewhere else. And I'm just going to place retaining walls for the rest of it, and then we're going to smooth out the terrain just so that it feels a little bit more intentional, a little bit more on its own parcel. And we'll just smooth this one here. I am happy with that, except for the bushes. So I'm just going to delete these ones for now, because it's also made the green go away. So yeah, that fixes that up. This one is outside of the green area too. Brilliant. And in terms of upgrades, we are going to leave it as it is for now. What I will do, however, is give it a little bit of vegetation around. And I'm going to do this with the line tool. We're going to do a bit of an offset, a bit of a spacing variation, and it gives us a slightly more natural placement. Reduce the offset. Yeah. Just is slightly more realistic in terms of how lined up they are. I feel like it makes it pop that little bit more. And we're going to save some space next to it for any upgrades that it might have in the future. So for now, I am just going to do my classic oak trees mixed with some birches, just to get this visually filled in. Some hickories and the birches. This will do for now while we eventually develop this area a little bit more. The second thing that I want to have a look at is the insane amounts of traffic that we are beginning to get through the city. I think this is maybe just a slight glitch, as this car's wanting to go straight forward and these cars are impedimenting it. However, I think one thing that's going to help us is connecting this road temporarily to allow another access point to this area of town, as at the moment everybody is being filtered through this overpass, which is holding up well, but we're going to need a bit of extra help. So this is by no means the permanent connection that we're going to be making, but for now we're just going to connect this up along here, and we might just put, it's made a traffic light already, so we're going to leave that as that is, and we'll see how much usage this road now gets. But gosh, this is not looking good. I am going to try deleting the vehicle though, as this shouldn't be happening. There is something happening in this particular part of the node, but vehicles are moving now, so that's better. Sometimes it is just a couple of vehicles stuck, although now we are stuck on this roundabout. We're going to have to spend an episode looking at the infrastructure and the traffic, but for now I wanted to place a bus stop just here, just as an outward connection for our city. So we're going to start by moving this commercial asset which I also think looks a little bit better on the roundabout as you come in to see the roundness of the building. And then the bus stop that I want to place here is actually the small bus station. And I'm going to use this as the station for our college, but also to create an outside connection. So for now, we are going to get that in place. So we'll go into our bus line tool, and right now we have no outside city connections in. Oh, first let's add the extra stops as well. But we have no outside city connections to New Bubbington. So this is going to be the very first one, and it is the opposite side of the map. But I think this is going to really help decongest a little bit. And we'll go into the lines automatically and maybe reduce the amount of buses, as that's scheduled 18. I think let's start with 10. And we're going to make this a red. And this is going to be our intercity to outside connection, which for now we're just going to call New Bubbington to outside. So the bus stop is definitely seeing some use. We're going to let it play out, see how many buses we might need eventually, but at the moment they are leaving pretty full, although I imagine there'd be quite a strong initial influx. So we'll leave it at 10 buses for now and see what we need moving forward. But I think that's going to wrap up for today's episode, and in the next one we're going to focus on expanding the public transport all across the city, as I think we're in dire need at this stage. But for today, I'm really happy with my canal district of super luxurious modern homes, and I think maybe the last thing that we should do is actually create a district and ask for some name suggestions, and see what you guys think that this district should be called. So let's get that created. Brilliant. So we've got Birch Acres for now, and we can see the average wealth is wealthy, which makes sense. There's high crime, which is maybe something we want to look into in the next episode, as I'd like to think this part of town would be really safe and beautiful to live in. But for now, I'm going to leave you with some cinematics from what we've done today, and I hope to see you next time.